State your next witness.
Dr. Karsten.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please be seated. State and spell your name for the record.
My name's Dr. Jordan Karsten. It's Jordankarsten.
How are you employed?
I'm a professor of anthropology at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, and I'm also a professional consultant for the Wisconsin State Crime Lab through the Wisconsin Department of Justice.
What do you teach at UW-Oshkosh?
I'm a biological anthropologist, so primarily my work is focused on the human skeleton. So I teach classes in human skeletal anatomy, teach classes in forensic anthropology, biological anthropology, genetics, sometimes archaeology, depending on what's needed.
Could you just briefly summarize sort of your background in training and education?
Yeah, so in terms of education, I got 2 bachelor's degrees from Grand Valley State University in Michigan. One was a bachelor's of science in anthropology, the other was a bachelor's of science in health sciences. And then I got a master's from the State University of New York in Albany and a PhD my master's was in anthropology and my PhD is also in anthropology from the State University of New York in Albany.
How long have you been an anthropologist? I might have missed it.
How long? I graduated college in '09 and I graduated my PhD in 2014. And I've been a professor at UW-Oshkosh since then in 2014, so I've been in the state for 11 years.
Were you contacted on or about April 3rd of 2024 by the Milwaukee County Medical Examiner's Office regarding a leg that had been recovered?
I was.
What was the nature of that contact? Why were they contacting you?
I was contacted by Charles Rohr, Dr. Charles Rohr, who is a forensic pathology fellow at the Milwaukee County Medical Examiner's Office. He told me that a human leg had washed up on the shore at Warnemount Park in Cudahy, and that he was interested in having me examine part of the skeletal remains to look at if the individual was dismembered, how that might have happened, and look to see if there were any tool marks present on the bone.
So what was requested of you was an examination originally just of the leg for a tool marks analysis?
Correct.
Okay. And as well as just a general examination of the trauma to the skeletal remains to see if you could figure out what happened?
Correct.
Did you in fact examine skeletal remains from that leg?
I did.
And over the course of the next weeks and months actually, did you also come to examine additional skeletal remains that were recovered related to this case?
Yes.
Did you subsequently prepare a report to document what you observed and what your findings were?
I did.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 409.
I don't object to this for the record.
Okay.
And it'll be received into evidence.
All right, 409 is received into evidence. That's your report, Dr. Karsten?
It is.
I'm going to pull it up on the screen next to you, and I would like to go through it with you in summation. And while I'm pulling this up, can you tell the jury overall what bones did you examine?
I examined a right femur, which is essentially complete, part of a left femur, left tibia, left fibula, right humerus, right radius, and a right ulna, as well as 2 cervical vertebrae and a patella, which is the kneecap.
And are you able to discuss an overall pattern of what you saw through your analysis of these skeletal remains?
Yeah, so overall pattern is the majority of the remains had some type of blunt force trauma, which had fractured the bones. and many of the bones had cut marks, and the cut marks themselves were superficial. They had what I call a V-shaped kerf. The kerf is the incision on bone, and so it was shallow, shaped as a V, and fairly regular walls. And those cut marks were found at locations across different bones, primarily in places where there are areas of muscle attachment and connective tissue attachment.
Okay, and did the fact that those cut marks to the bones were in those locations suggest anything to you?
It's consistent with the manipulation of soft tissue and dismemberment.
Were you able to examine or come to any kind of conclusions as to what kind of blades were used?
All I can say is that whatever caused the sharp force trauma, the blade itself had a V shape to it, and it was not serrated. So a serrated knife, like a steak knife, will produce a kerf, an incision in bone that's irregular. And this incision was not irregular. It was kind of uniform.
On any of them?
For all of them. Okay. There was no irregular aspect to the curves.
And based on the size of those cut marks and V-shaped markings, are you able to come to any conclusions about the size of the knife used?
I can't. When a knife comes into contact with bone, depending on the level of force, how much the knife actually contacts the bone, it can be very small kerf. You can push harder, make the kerf larger. So I can't say anything about the size of the blade.
Only thing you can say is whether the shape and then whether it was serrated or non-serrated.
In this case, yes.
And how is it that you're able to tell whether it's serrated or non-serrated?
Serrated blades will create, if you think of a serrated blade like a steak knife, essentially, they'll create a more irregular kerf or cut on the bone.
You may have mentioned this, but can you give some examples of some types of non-serrated blades?
Sure, like a paring knife would be a good example. You have plenty of blades in kitchens that are non-serrated. Simple blades. I mean, you could have say a fishing knife you'd use to fillet a fish would also typically be a non-serrated blade.
Were you able to identify blunt force trauma to any of the limbs?
Yes, on many of them.
Okay. I'm going to go through this, and let's start with, we're going to start with the right femur. If you want to flip to that page or follow along on the screen to your right. Let's talk about what you knew about the right femur, what you discovered.
Sure. So for the right femur itself, it has evidence of blunt force trauma. I don't know if we can go forward. Is that possible? So if you go to figure 1, you can see the complete right femur. The black arrow is showing an area that's approximately where there would have been force applied to the femur. If you go down to figure 2.
And just to be clear before I do that, this would have been the right leg, the leg that was...
This is the right thigh.
From Warnemont Park.
Right thigh bone, from Warnemont Park.
Okay.
So if you go down here, you can see a little bit closer on the right femur. The black arrow is the point where force would have been applied. And the way that we can reconstruct that is that bone is stronger in compression than tension. And so when blunt force trauma is applied to a limb, it causes a bone to bend. And in that process, the area that when it bends and goes into tension, that's where a fracture will start. And from the point in tension, the fracture shears over to the compression side. So can I point at this?
Yes, I think there's actually a microphone next to you if you can turn that on.
Okay. It's on. Does that work? Maybe not. Okay, that works. If you take a look here, you can see that if force was applied here, the bone would have bent, kind of bowed out like this, and then you would have had that area of tension right there where the fracture starts, and it shears over to the other sides. And then what happens is it removes this kind of rhomboidal shaped, or what often gets called lozenge of bone, and so that broke free. And so on the right femur, in this case, we actually have 3 different pieces of bone that result from this fracturing. One that's here that includes the femoral head, which goes into the hip socket of the pelvis, this lozenge shape of bone, and then the larger part, which includes the entire rest of the femur.
Would a person be able to apply the force necessary to cause this damage?
Yes, depending on the person and the circumstances, I believe, yeah,
You believe yes? Okay.
correct.
Are you able to comment on the difficulty to cause this fracture?
It would be difficult, but it would be possible.
I'm going to move to strike that. In the last two answers and questions, he's not a use of force expert. I don't think he's been qualified in this topic that we're going into.
I can ask him some foundational questions.
Okay, lay the foundation.
Do you have any expertise in being able to determine what kind of force needs to be used to fracture bones in this fashion?
As part of my job with the Department of Justice for the Crime Lab, I will remove pieces of bone for subsequent chemical and genetic analysis. And so, yeah, I'm familiar with what is required to break bone.
I would ask then the objection be,
Withdrawn.
okay. All right, so let's pick up where I was left off here. On this part, on this femur bone, were there cut marks?
Yes.
Is this the good figure for that, or is there? A
If you could move forward to figure 7. So on figure 7, you can see a close-up of the lozenge shape of bone. And then on the opposite side where the black arrows are, you can see a series of superficial cut marks. These are on an area that's called the linea aspera, and it is an area of muscle and connective tissue attachment.
And would that's the location of those cut marks suggest what soft tissue would have been being cut?
There are many, many muscles and aspects of connective tissue that connect there. You couldn't say exactly what.
What part of the body is this, I guess?
This is on the posterior side of your thigh,
So by your hip?
below that,
Below your hip, okay.
back of the leg, essentially, back of the upper leg.
Let's go to figure 11. How about this one?
Yep, figure 11 shows additional cut marks. So the black arrow shows like a roughly kind of horizontally oriented cut mark. In the red circle, there are additional cut marks, superficial cut marks, and then in the black circle, hard to see, but there are additional very faint cut marks.
Would the cut marks that you noticed when you examined the bones from the right leg from Warnemont Park, would that have been consistent to have been logically been in an effort to remove soft tissue?
Yes, it's in the area that's close to the hip.
Okay, the top of the leg.
Correct.
Are you able to tell whether the blunt force trauma to the bones, like we saw before, occurred before or after the sharp force trauma to the tissues?
For these, I cannot say.
You are able to conclude that it was the blunt force trauma that caused the fractures?
Yes.
All right, anything else about the right femur?
Figure 12 shows an additional couple of cut marks.
Okay.
This is on the front side, anterior side of the femur, in an area that's known as the intertrochanteric line, which is another area of ligamentous and muscle attachment. If you go to figure 13, you'll see even more cut marks. This is on the lateral side of the proximal femur, so the part that's closest to your hip. The black, red, and blue arrows all point to individual cut marks on that figure. And then on figure 14, up on an area that's known as the greater trochanter of the femur, which is another muscle attachment and area of connective tissue attachment, you can see more cut marks, superficial ones with the red arrows, and then with the blue arrow, you can actually see one where the cut mark has kind of peeled back the bone. And so that cut mark must have been delivered in a kind of up, kind of above body to below, so what we call superior to inferior direction.
Would it be fair to say that the cut marks you observed were generally concentrated, towards the transection end of the leg?
Not just in the, I wouldn't say like in the hip.
Okay.
It's from kind of the upper third of the leg is where we are finding the cut marks.
All right, let's move on to the left tibia. What did you observe about the left tibia?
The left tibia has one aspect of blunt force trauma. So if you look at figure 16, you can see the tibia is separated and the tibia is the shin bone. Figure 16, that's the upper part of the tibia, so that kind of plateau area is what makes up your knee. And then if you go down to figures 18, You can see on the left, that's the upper part of the tibia. In the middle and removed, that's this lozenge shape of kind of rhomboidal shaped bone that gets removed during bending fractures caused by blunt force trauma. And then on the right is a shaft of the tibia. And then if you go to figure 19, you can see without that lozenge shape how it goes back together. And if you go to figure 20, you can see that lozenge shape is replaceable into the break. And so in this case, if you could go back to figure 19 quickly, where that black arrow is, that's where the force would have been applied. So this is on the medial side, so the inner side of the leg, with the force moving from the inner side of the leg to the outer, what we'd say is medial lateral force. And so it broke on the far side away from the arrow.
You use the term butterfly fracture here in the description. What is that?
Butterfly fracture is a term we just use for these fractures where bending of the bone has that lozenge-shaped breakaway. And so it tends to break away this rhomboidal piece of bone that kind of looks like one wing of a butterfly.
Okay.
Sorry.
I was just going to ask you whether there were cut marks to the bone that would have separated the bottom from the ankle.
Yeah, if you go to figure 22, this is the bottom part of a fibula. So this is where your shin bone comes into contact with your ankle. And you can see with the black arrow, one of these superficial cut marks across that part of the bone. If you go to figure 23, you can see additional, this is twisting the bone around a little bit. You can see additional cut marks highlighted with the arrows and an area of bone that was damaged in the black circle. And if you go to figure 24, this is twisting the bone around to what's known as the medial malleolus. So this is like the big bump on the inner part of your ankle. You can see another couple of superficial cut marks there as well. So cut marks around the distal part of the femur, lower shin bone.
All of these cut marks, these superficial cut marks, all the ones we're talking about, these are all from some kind of a non-serrated V-shaped blade?
Yep, they're what we call a V-shaped kerf. So they're superficial, they don't go deep into the bone, and they don't show any hallmarks of being serrated because the kerf is not irregular.
Intentional cut marks?
There's only one way to cut into bone, and that's by purposely putting a knife there.
And only way to cut it, one way to cut into tissue as well.
Correct.
Let's move on to the left fibula. What did you notice?
Left fibula has two instances of blunt force trauma. If you look at figure 25, you can see with the black arrows, the area where the force would have been applied. And it's just like the pictures we've seen so far. It's these butterfly fractures, bending fractures. In this case, the force would have been applied anterior to posterior. So the fibula is a bone that is in your lower leg. It sits next to your shin bone on the outside of your shin bone. And so those two areas of force didn't actually have enough force to cause the bone to completely break. And so you can't remove those lozenge-shaped pieces of bone. That bone still is a single element that's not separatable.
And regarding cut marks on the left fibula?
There's a single cut mark in figure 28. So this is an area that's just above what's known as the lateral malleolus. And so that is the bump on the outer side of your ankle. And just above it, where the black arrow is, you can see another one of these kind of horizontally oriented superficial cut marks with a V-shaped curve.
Anything else about the left fibula?
No.
All right. The right humerus, what's the humerus?
Humerus is the bone of the upper arm.
Let's talk about the right humerus.
In this case, in figure 30, you can see the head of the right humerus. This is what makes up your shoulder joint from your upper arm. Only that is present here, and there is a fracture to the bone that's removed it from the rest of the humerus.
Is the removal of the humeral head evidence of blunt force injury?
This likely is, yes.
Okay. Let's go to the left femur. This was let's talk about the left femur. Go ahead.
Okay, if you go to figure 34.
Sure.
The proximal left femur, so the part that's closest to the hip, the head of the femur, what goes into the hip socket, is preserved. as well as part of the neck of that. But then there is what we call a comminuted fracture. And so you've got a blunt force impact that has taken the bone there and broken it up into many small pieces. And so that has destroyed, although those fragments are still adherent, the lateral side of this femur. And so force was probably applied in a superior, so upper lateral down to inferior medial, so kind of direction.
Okay. Any cut marks?
On this part, the superior part of the left femur, no. If you go to figure 36, you can see additional aspects of blunt force trauma. So the black arrow shows blunt force trauma that removed a lozenge shape of bone, but that was never recovered. And then the red arrow shows another one of those fractures, just like we've seen in the other pictures of this kind of butterfly fracture that was also applied to the femur. And then at the very far right side of the picture, there's another one of these bending butterfly fractures caused by blunt force trauma. And so in this femur, we've got at least 4 instances of blunt force trauma to the left femur.
And how many of those instances were consistent with the right femur?
They're in very different places than the right femur.
Okay. Any evidence of cut marks?
Yes, if you go to figure 42. So every black arrow is a superficial cut mark on the anterior femur. There's at least 11 superficial cut marks there. In this picture, there are 7 that are highlighted. If you go to figure 43, you can see one of these a little bit more close up. In this case, that cut mark exhibits what we call kerf flare. And so that is where you can see the cut marks are almost superimposed one on the other. And this is something that you see when a non-serrated blade is used in a sawing motion.
All right, so this was evidence that there was a sawing motion to cut the tissue around the femur.
Correct.
Okay. All right. In June, much later, you had received bones from the right arm that had washed up in Waukegan, Illinois, correct?
Correct.
All right. Let's talk about that right arm. What did you notice?
If you go to figure 46, in the area with the black circle, you can see cut marks that are on the side of the humerus, the proximal humerus, so it's up towards the shoulder. On the medial side, so the side that's like kind of towards your armpit, there were no cut marks. If you go to figure 48, you can see that on the kind of lateral posterior side, there are additional cut marks highlighted in the black circle. These are kind of difficult to see, so if you go to figure 50, I'll go up actually.
Oh, sorry.
Yep, there's a close-up picture here of the cut marks on the humerus. And so you can see here several of these V-shaped curved superficial cut marks on the proximal humerus. So this area is known as, this includes the greater and lesser tubercle of the humerus, and these are areas muscle attachment for the shoulder.
Was there similar indication on these of a sawing motion being used?
Yeah, some of these curves are kind of superimposed one onto the next, and so likely reflect sawing motion.
And that would have been an intentional act?
Yes.
All right. How about the radius?
If we go to the radius, if you could look at figure 57.
57, okay.
So the radius is a bone in the forearm. And on figure 57, you can see the black arrows highlighting a single superficial cut mark on the distal part of the radius. This is the part that's towards your wrist. If you then go to figure 61, you can see a close-up of that. Could you go up just a little bit, I guess?
Sorry.
Yeah, you can see a little bit better that superficial cut mark. If you go down to figure 62, you can actually see a good example of kerf flaring. And so that's where you've got this cut mark, but on the end, the kerf, there's actually a couple of different tracks to that knife, and that, again, is something that's consistent with using a non-serrated knife in a sawing motion. And then in figure 63, that close-up gives a good example of what I mean by a V-shaped kerf. That's this incision in the bone, takes on a V shape, but has a very regular floor to the kerf, which is something that you see in a non-serrated blade.
So the person who caused these marks that I'm looking at here in 62 was intentionally sawing at the bone with a non-serrated blade?
They were sawing at the bone with a non-serrated blade.
Any cut marks near the elbow?
No.
And you had looked at the, anything else on this,
For the ulna?
the right arm?
Yep, so the ulna is another bone of the forearm, makes it kind of the inner part of the forearm. And if you go up actually just a little bit, at 67? Okay, 67 shows the location of two of these superficial cut marks on the ulna. This is the distal part, so the part that towards where it's at is towards the wrist. The part on the left side of the screen is towards the elbow. And if you go to figure 68, you can see them a little bit close up there, the superficial cut marks on the distal ulna.
Anything else on this one?
No fractures to the ulna or the radius.
You examined some of the cervical vertebrae?
Yes.
Next, okay.
I was given two cervical vertebrae to examine.
And where were those from on the body, if you could just help us
Cervical
out?
vertebra is the vertebrae that make up your neck.
And what did you notice when you looked at the cervical vertebrae?
No evidence of cut marks. The only trauma was on the most superior of the two cervical vertebrae. And if you look at figure 69, you can see that on the right side of the cervical vertebra, on a feature that we call the transverse process, there is damage to the top of it, highlighted with the black and red arrows, and that's likely caused by blunt force trauma.
Blunt force trauma?
Likely, yes.
And lastly, the patella. What is the patella?
Patella is the kneecap.
What'd you notice?
No evidence of trauma or cut marks.
That was from the left leg?
Let me double check. Yes, left patella.
Are you aware, or can you speak on the time frame it would take a person to cause the damage that you analyzed in these figures?
I don't think I could give an estimate of that.
I have nothing else.
Karsten?
What you can give an estimate on is just how difficult it is to remove bones from a human body without the right tools, right? You can take that down, Ian.
I have never, I mean, I've removed bones from each other with tools. Yes.
Right. What types of tools?
If I was going to separate two bones from each other for the purpose of an examination, I would use a scalpel. To get through soft tissue.
Right, to get through soft tissue.
Correct.
So I thought before you had said you have experience removing bones from a human body, no?
I've experienced removing bone from bone, like breaking off a piece of bone for sampling, and separating bones from each other for the purposes of analysis.
Okay, so you've taken two bones apart on occasion for your work.
Correct.
But you've never done an autopsy.
Correct, I'm not a pathologist.
Okay, and are you able to speak to how much force is required to remove bones from a human body?
Yes, I mean, for me, when I do it, I typically use something like a small Dremel tool, and we can use that to remove pieces of bone from a human body, so a small motorized saw.
Okay, a small motorized saw.
Correct.
What do you
remove
wear?
Small pieces.
Okay, and what do you wear when you do that?
Protective glasses, protective mouth and nose coverings.
Why?
I would rather not breathe in bone dust.
Okay, bone dust would get on you.
If I was using a saw, correct.
And if you're removing a bone, if you're cutting through flesh, you could get bodily fluids on you.
Correct.
Blood,
Yes, correct.
other such fluids that would just be within the body, right?
Correct.
It would be a very messy process to dismember a body. You would agree with that?
Depending on the condition of the body, yes.
Right. If a body was newly deceased in particular, it would be particularly messy.
I don't have experience with that.
You have no experience with dismembering, taking body parts off of a newly deceased body.
No, anthropologists tend to get involved when there's considerable decomposition or a complete skeletonization.
And obviously things become weaker with age, right? Things degrade.
Depends on the context of deposition.
Well, but you would agree with that proposition, wouldn't you? That bones don't get stronger as they over time.
I actually disagree with that. So if you have a bone that's deposited in like say a soil matrix that has a large mineral content, I have excavated personally bones that are 6,000 years old that are heavier, beefier, and stronger than fresh bone.
Got it. Here we're talking about new bones that are not 6,000 years old, sir.
Correct.
Okay. So these bones, as you understand it, were the bones from somebody who is recently deceased. You understand that, right?
Yes, definitely.
And that the bones were located out in nature, right?
Yes, correct.
Not in a special soil matrix.
Correct.
And they were found in various parts of nature, water, the woods, things like that.
That's my understanding, yes.
And all I'm asking you is, would you agree with me that as time goes by in those conditions, things will tend to degrade?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the size of the knife, or if it was a knife, you have no idea if it even was a knife, do you?
It's a sharp blade.
Or it could be an axe.
It would be very unlikely to be an axe.
It could be an axe.
To make those kind of cut marks would be very, very unlikely.
Well, that's for the cut marks. But for other parts of what you looked at, it could be an axe for other things.
For the blunt
right?
force trauma, that would definitely be a possibility.
Right, where we're seeing the bone itself literally fractured, right?
Correct.
Because when you're telling the jury about blunt force trauma, you're talking about one of the exhibits we saw was literally part of the proximal right femur broken off, right?
Correct.
So you wouldn't rule out an axe on that?
No, not at all. Axes can impart blunt force trauma because of their wedge-shaped action. And so if an axe is used and is applied with force to human bone, it doesn't necessarily make a cut. It can result in strictly blunt force trauma.
Were you given pictures of items that were recovered from, you understand Mr. Anderson's accused of this crime, right? Do you
Yes.
understand that? Were you given pictures of items that were recovered from Mr. Anderson's home and asked to offer an opinion? Let me finish. About whether these items were used in this dismemberment?
Not that I have any recollection of.
So no,
Correct.
no axe given to you to say, was this used?
No, never.
Or pocket knife or anything else?
No.
And we'd have to ask you said a forensic pathologist could speak more intelligently about the level of force you required to fracture bones, right?
Yes, I would think so.
For example, when you talked about the proximal right femur, you know that it's a lot of force needed to break a femur bone, right?
Correct.
How many hundreds of pounds of force, or you can't speak to?
I couldn't say in that bone and its mechanical properties varies person to person.
Some bones are stronger than others just
Also
because
true.
of their calcium concentration, right?
Sure, yes, correct.
And what you do know, or what you've been able to identify in your report, is basically, let's just go to the bottom line conclusion. Bottom line conclusion is that some sort of sharp instrument was used to remove bones from a body.
Yes.
Okay, you can't say that Mr. Anderson did that.
No.
You can't say who did it,
Correct.
or where it happened,
Also correct.
or even the item that was used for it.
Also correct.
Okay, that's all.
State.
I have nothing else.
Thank you, Doctor. Thanks.